Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, Pwn Phone, and Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com. In order to deliver the maximum degree of privacy, personal data must be protected without action from an individual. In fact, this requirement is defined in the General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR. What if you could reliably and efficiently build privacy into your information security programs by default? StealthBits Technologies provides solutions that allow data to be collected and used in a manner that achieves GDPR compliance. Privacy by design and by default is not just a GDPR requirement, it's the foundation of StealthBits Technologies. Visit stealthbits.com to learn more today. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. The first, B-Sides in Uganda is happening October 14th through the 15th. B-Sides Kampala, the CFP, is open until July 15th, which is pretty soon here now. They're looking for topics including network and web application security, innovative attack and defense, biometrics, evolutionary, even computing, robotics. Bonus points if you bring your robot. BSidesKampala.com. Submit today. In other conference news, Wild West Hack and Fest put on by Black Hills Information Security. They may do another round of tickets. I'm not quite sure. I believe they will. They're working on it. We'll get an update hopefully this month. John's actually on vacation this week, so which is why he's not here. October 27th and 28th, great talks from Dave Kennedy, Deviant Egypt, Chris Nickerson, Chris Gates, Mike Poor, Sub T, and more. Check us out at wildwesthackinfest.com, HACKINfest.com. We are looking for sponsors for that event, which every time John seems to do a round of tickets, it becomes sold out. And then I don't know what he's doing to make more seats available, but he's slowly growing it. I don't know if it's like maxed out.
Maybe they got a new venue or something.
I'm not sure what. Yeah, we're getting.
I don't know how many venues there are in Deadwood, South Dakota, but
we're going to be bring your own tent and sleeping bag.
Ooh, dear.
And we have. Hold on. Is there another announcement here? Hold on. My teleprompter's acting weird because really the problem is between it's Domain Tools. Has a whole bunch of stuff. Wow. Whether you're phishing, hacking, or spying, threat actors are using domains and IP addresses to launch their attacks. And while you might not be interested in targeted attacks yet, targeted attacks are interested in you. Your ability to map and characterize the attacker's infrastructure is crucial. Join Domain Tools senior security researcher Kyle Wilhoit and the director of product management Tim Helming on virtual ride-along using Domain Tools Iris. They use real-world cases even to show you how quickly and efficiently expose the adversary's infrastructure. The webinar is happening at some time. Visit domaintools.com/security weekly. Find out all of the details. It's going to be fun. I'm very excited to welcome Domain Tools as a sponsor, do some webcasts with them. They have awesome stuff. They monitor all the domains and IP addresses for badness, essentially.
Yeah, that's a really cool tool that Iris stuff is. I looked at that for somebody a while. Or nice. I don't know if it just came out, but that some tool they had we were looking at, and I was really interested in that. So you should check that out because I think that's going to be a really cool addition to the show, and you can get some stuff on here. And check out their cases because that's always fun.
Yes. All righty. So egress filtering. Oh, so I wanted to start. pfSense just had a cross-site scripting vulnerability in the DHCP lease host name. Do you see pfSense in those type of firewalls? Not so much in enterprises, right? I mean, enterprises are pretty much Palo Alto, Cisco. Fortinet, I think, is creeping into that enterprise. Checkpoint is still big as well.
Yep.
I mean, that's if you're looking for enterprise firewalling, that's where people go. They don't often. I don't often see. I did see some really cool stuff in my university days.
Well,
it was Ohio State. What was the BSD firewall? Is it PF? I think it's PF. PF is it PF?
BSD. Yeah, it might be PF. I don't remember what
called PF.
But that's the original source.
The open source.
pfSense is based on that open source, so I think that is the BFD.
Yeah, BSD-based firewall, and packaged it up and had that running on not open source hardware, but regular hardware. Yeah. Put the BSD firewall on it, and that's how he was managing his enterprise. And this was years ago.
Well,
so I have seen some really cool open source firewalling stuff happen. Largely, in the enterprises, the big players. I think in smaller enterprises, you're doing open wall. Sophos is big in that market, and there's a couple other. They used to call them UTMs or Unified Threat Management. I don't know, is that still a term they use? But
I've seen that term. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think regardless of how you're deploying your firewall, egress filtering is just so important. Is it still really left out today? I mean, I remember my first firewall project was Checkpoint, and then I went to work for a university, and back then it was NetScreen, which I thought was interesting. In our story we talked about before, which I didn't realize that the founder of NetScreen founded NetScreen in 1996, actually got out and started Fortinet.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Ken Jay, is that how you say that?
Shit.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Our expert on Chinese language and culture, Doug White. So he transitioned into Fortinet. So I thought that was interesting. But I used to find egress filtering back in the late 90s, early 2000s, essentially didn't exist. And remember those early Microsoft worms could just run free because there was no egress
blocks,
filtering. Yeah. But I still think even today we have this issue because pen testers are largely so successful in being able to egress out of the network. And I think you can make their lives a lot more difficult. However, if they're smart enough and using the right techniques, they're going to get outside of what you can do on the firewall, right? Because you got to let stuff like DNS out. If 80 and 443s, I mean, if you're proxying it, yes, but there is even malware payloads that can figure out what the proxy is and get credentials and get out that way as well. So, of course, you can always drop in a 4G device, and I've seen, Pony Express is famous for that, right? I drop the device in and it's 4G. So realize that your firewall egress filtering, there are boundaries around it. However, I think in just a general sense, making it harder to communicate out, because a lot of the damage comes from when you're able to communicate out. Regular egress filtering is going to make attackers' lives pretty miserable.
I mean, I don't think it's widely done. I mean, it's something that's a hard sell, because when you go to management, and I mean, it always comes down to management because they're writing the checks. I mean, we all want to do all kinds of things, and we'd have gold-plated server rooms if we could get away with it, but we can't. So what happens is, when you start trying to do egress filtering, a lot of pieces come into play, and one of the pieces is immediately it causes catastrophe. So you've had a wide open network, so every person in the network can go to anything they want to go to. They can use any service they want to use. They can do whatever they want to do out in the world. All of a sudden, you say, we're going to get away from that. And I've done that with a couple of companies, a couple of big ones, and boy, was it fun. Let me tell you.
There's always exceptions.
Well, there's exceptions.
No one's going to need outbound SSH from...
Until they do.
Like, if you take your even departments like, marketing and sales and HR, like non-technically focused. I mean, not that they're not technically focused, but think of the users that normally wouldn't be like, hey, I need to SSH to my Linux server on the internet.
Yeah.
Right? You always have some exception, like, well, no, there's this one box and it needs SSH.
Well, when we implemented this, we went out and we put basically heavy tracking on all outbound traffic for a while, trying to develop a profile of what was being done, because most companies
use NetFlow. That's a great use case for NetFlow.
Exactly. Your company's probably no exception to this. You have evolved it over time. You've got users over here doing this. You've got users over here doing this. Some of them are doing stuff they shouldn't do, but a lot of them are doing things they're supposed to do that were never documented. This thing was added. That thing was added. And we all want to control everything, but we can't. And what we saw was the minute we slapped this in there, all of a sudden there's all this stuff not working right. And today it's even worse because of the cloud and because of all these other, speaking of the cloud, and because of all these other features. And then when management looks at that proposal and they say, this is going to cost a lot of money to evaluate. And they say, why do we really need this? Now, we've taken the tack of that there's a liability issue for you. So the fact that you can end up being liable if users inside your company, so your legitimate users, are doing things they're not supposed to be doing because they decide to attack someone. You could be liable because a worm uses your networks as a basis to propagate and attack someone and causes fiduciary harm. And the minute we start saying the word fiduciary harm, lawyers start circling around the IT people like sharks with money in the water, and they start thinking, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, and they get all sweaty because they think this is going to be a big one because your network was compromised, and they can hire an expert who can come in there and say, look, let me explain how this worked. These negligent, horrifically incompetent people failed to do a simple thing, blocking outbound traffic from their network, and allowed this heinous activity to occur and horrifically damage my client for hundreds of millions of dollars. Think of the children, oh God. And the next thing
I'm still trying to get over sweaty lawyers.
You never saw a sweaty lawyer? You just got to get in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Oh boy, they get all worked up into a froth.
Sweaty. That's got to be the episode title.
Sweaty lawyers. Sweaty lawyers dripping in a froth. But
you're so graphic, Doug.
I love it. That's why they have me. But that works in court. They love that with experts too. If you can give graphic examples, like because jurors,
you're like the king of graphic examples.
Well, imagine a juror sitting there who can barely read and write. And we had one once, and we're supposed to explain this like horrific statistics, programming, monopoly thing to them, and this juror can literally barely get through an Archie comic on a good day, and I'm supposed to explain this stuff to them, and that's where these kind of graphic examples really bring it home. And that person sitting there going, "Ooh, sweaty lawyers swimming in a circle around the pool of money. Ooh, I get it. I vote yes."
I can't get that image out of my head now.
I'm very happy. My work here is done. I'm out. It's just like mic drop. But the point is, on the egress fee, we did sell it with liability issues, and a lot of companies, legal people, started looking at this. That was the non-sweaty lawyers who were sitting there going, "I don't know. I'm quite concerned," and they were looking at it, saying, he's right. Because I was sitting on boards saying this to people and saying, this is scary, this is a fiduciary harm kind of situation. And this was early, and people were not necessarily buying into it. But the lawyers started going, And when lawyers start going, you're getting somewhere. And the next thing you know, the lawyers are coming back going, okay, so what do we need to do?
Right.
And then you can start doing assessments and say, it's going to cost $100,000 for them to evaluate this. It's going to cost another $100,000 to implement it and another $100,000 to maintain it. But the liability downstream from not doing it becomes so heinous.
And not just because of the fiduciary harm, potentially, also security-wise, too, it's
Absolutely.
A great decision. I also think that network performance-wise and monitoring, it's a great decision.
Absolutely.
You should log. Well, I don't know. I think sometimes it's better in these situations just to log what is accepted and not so much denied. Although the denied logs do have value there too.
Egress, I will tell you, we were setting up this stuff called Dan's Guardian, which is an open source product. And I love Dan's Guardian. I still do. Hey, Dan. It's a great product that we were setting up because it filtered websites just for web filtering. So this is a specialized kind of egress. But
is that still a thing? Or are we going to the Wayback Machine?
No, it's there.
Wow. I haven't heard that in so long.
You could put this on an old server and set it there. It's a proxy server is essentially what it is. But the idea was, and there was a lot of controversy about this with enterprise back in, say, like 2003, 2004, 2005, because people were talking about productivity. You were talking about our employees actually, they weren't even thinking about security or attacks or worms or anything. They were thinking about, or what if our employees are going to Ticketmaster and they're shopping for concert tickets? They're looking at pornography. They're gambling. All the things we caught people doing at work. You know who you are. And, Dan's Guardian was able to start restricting that. And we actually initially, until people learned, we monitored what was denied. And the way I did it at one place was this was oh, this is awesome. You're going to love it. What it did was if you try to go to a website, okay, so this is great. You try to go to a website that's not on the approved list. It pops up a screen that says, you have attempted to go to this website. Please enter an explanation for why you went to this website so that we can better ascertain whether this website is necessary. And watching people try to explain why they were going to like XXXcheerleaders.com because it was helping them to understand the marketing mentality of their customer base, it was awesome. But today, I think filtering like that initially and watching what's being denied will help you, one, get a handle on, are we blocking too much? You know, you can start looking at percentages and like, wow, look at this, 80% of our outbound traffic is being blocked. We either need to train our employees better, tell them what they're not supposed to be doing, or we need to say, maybe we need to ease up on this a little bit because we're blocking too many things. Now, when you get this into a stable environment, I am a big fan of exception-only logging, so not denieds now in this case, but just, oddities. Because if you try to log too much, your people who review the logs go, wow, 800,000 pages this morning alone. I'm not going to look at this. I'm just going to sign off and move on.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of exceptions that you're going to have to make when you do any kind of egress filtering like that. I mean, that's just we experienced it here. I did that segment where we're blocking ads.
Yeah.
And then we started playing around with Google AdWords. And, like, you can't manage Google AdWords or AdSense if you're blocking those domains. We had to whitelist a bunch of stuff. But the problem with that is, like, which domains, like, the domain names change and the whitelisting isn't working right. So then I just end up pointing at new DNS servers. So that's...
Website whitelisting today has gotten very complex because so many websites have embedded, and there's so many embedded links and all these things, and it just doesn't work right unless you can create these, and then you end up with these, star whitelists that are just like, well, I think we're allowing everything, and there's all these. So that's a challenge. We always did a transparent monitor on the network for a while, just looking at what's going on, try to get a feel for it, make a map of what's happening, what are people using, why are they using it, and then take that back to management and legal and say, these people are going to PokerStars. They go there every morning, they play poker. What do you want to do? And they say, block it. It's like, okay, do you want us to also block this one and this one and this one and these other 5 poker sites? Right. And they go, oh. And then legal says, well, that could actually be a violation. It could be doing it on their break. And then the next thing you know, they say, let's just leave that. But blocking all this traffic is an important step in security because blocking ports that should not be outbound, blocking stray stuff and blocking the ability of worms to propagate and things like that is a critical thing for you liability-wise and security-wise.
Right.
Blocking.
You should monitor the denies, whether you do that with a packet filter or not. It's also kind of nice to know that it was blocked. Let's say you do get malware and it tries to talk out. I mean, it's just one more point that you're going to say, well, that workstation tried to make a connection. Right. It was denied, but it tried to make that connection on that port. So I was just in my head, I'm thinking about use cases.
To me, the way you monitor it is almost like a snort anvil, snort acid type old school.
Pro IDS is.
Where it's looking at the amount of events where you're looking at it. You're not saying, well, it happened once. There's this one stray package. Your logs are going to be 1 million pages long every day.
Well, actually, we do that analysis at Offensive Countermeasures.
Right.
If you do collect all the traffic, one of our analysis methods is to look at that because that's oftentimes it's malware where a host in a 24-hour period made a connection to a host on the internet only once and for a short period of time. When that happens, it's almost not always, but typically it is some kind of malware that's just trying to phone home because that one connection to one external host on one single port with a small amount of data, that's probably just hey, I'm still here.
But to be realistic too, you can overburden your people very quickly with that by saying you have to look at every single outbound packet connect over every 24-hour period. Sure, that's going to stop everything, but is that even feasible with your staffing? And I've seen that before.
You need tools, and I think that's where machine learning and big data
I agree.
Really come into play, but really have been overhyped as to what actually does those things and what doesn't, and in what context, right, and what does it the right way. And using what technology?
When I see machine learning and I see neural nets and I see fuzzies and all these, that's when I get sweaty and start going, oh. But then invariably I look at it and the sweat goes cold because what I do see then is...
It has to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And what we've talked about on the show in the past, right, there has to be a human like us or software that's written by humans that understands certain conditions and can help the analyst.
Right.
My example of the one connection we know, because we've seen that be anomalous, to roll that up and say, yeah, don't worry about all those other 16 million events. Like here is this one event that when coupled with this other event, and roll everything up. And that's what we're really struggling with today in the enterprise.
It is.
Technology that can actually do that.
That's why human analysts make a lot of money, because I want Mr. Data's positronic brain. That's what I want. But what I usually get is like, if then. And, I'm getting like the robot from some other, 50 sci-fi movie that's going, danger, Will Robinson.
It's true.
I can't quite explain it, and Dr. Smith could be a pedophile. But, don't know that for sure. But, I mean, they promise that. That's the marketing piece, is that, machine learning, because it's such a popular word, artificially intelligent. But
you're right. I think it's a great point. I never thought about it that way, that when some companies do say that, or at some point in a company, it was really just a bunch of if-thens. Right?
It is. And
that's not machine learning.
And I've seen that called advanced machine learning. And I'm like, this is an if-then statement. It's not it's not learning anything. It's just doing what you tell it to do. And if you don't tell it, it doesn't do it. Now, that doesn't mean that all products are like that. And you have to look at them carefully. And they're evolving rapidly, because we are seeing, advents of new things, and fuzzy and neural and all these kind of nice things that are coming about that can change the scope of this. And maybe someday we'll get Mr. Data's positronic brain, although then Mr. Data will want a lot of money to do that job, because unless we get that Star Trek economy, we're not getting anywhere. But the problem is, right now, you have to be careful with what's promised and what's actually delivered, and how it actually works, and can it evolve to meet your needs.
But I think largely, and I'm not sure what the landscape looks like today. I know when I was looking at it and talking with folks, egress filtering was kind of still evolving in terms of, hey, I'm going to just not allow all these ports out. I'm only going to allow port 80 and 443. I'm going to proxy that traffic, and then when I let DNS out, I'm going to monitor it, right? So if someone is using that as a backdoor channel, I know I have to let the port out. Egress filtering is not helping me. However, I'm forcing them to use those other methods, which I am monitoring. I think it's a valid strategy. Defense in depth is very controversial. I don't like to frame it as that. However, in this case, I think you need to know where your defenses are, and then know what some of the things that are going to be done to get around those and monitor those points. I think egress filtering helps you limit your attack surface from the inside out. It's not your externally facing necessarily attack surface, but it is still your attack surface.
Well, and don't forget that egress filtering also applies to ACKs. So those replies to inbound threats can be limited in that way as well. And and certainly that low-level thing is not to be disrespected. Packet filtering is really, really important. And it's the simplest, easiest solution to all your problems. It's the problem is when you can't filter, because you don't know the difference between the good packet and the bad packet. And the same thing, it applies inbound.
If we just, there's an RFC for the evil bit. We should just, I don't know why we didn't adopt that.
If only. Wouldn't that make things so simple? Then it's just...
If my packet's evil, I set the evil bit.
It's the FU field. And when you can flag that one, and exactly.
Right. You do, I think, run into a firewall management problem, which we've touched on the show in the past. Companies like FireMon do you have experience with any of those enterprise firewall policy management systems?
I evaluated a couple for different companies, and... I listened to the sales pitch from the marketing guy, which was, of course, blah, 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 everything will work great, blah, 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 blah. It will stop everything. And it's like, wow, would it stop this? Oh, of course it would. It's like, this thing can do everything in sliced bread. And you're like, really? And I actually think once I actually said something about the evil bit. I was like, so do these detect evil bit attacks? Because I always like to throw them these, and the guy's like, oh, absolutely. Evil bit attacks will be stopped. Absolutely. Right there at the border. Never again will you be threatened by evil bits. And,
it's a great follow-up question to it. So what problem are you trying to solve? And then do you stop the evil bit attack? That's a great.
And the guy's just all over it. He's just taking it and running with it. But the truth is that we looked at those products, and they basically were doing the same things that things like Dan's Guardian were doing. Now, and I love Dan's Guardian, but it really is just an if-then. It's a packet filter, and it's doing that. Some of these products did have advanced analysis, deep dive, and so on and so on.
Like FireMon, and I forget the other ones in the space.
I can't remember the name of the one I evaluated.
Yeah, but they do the network policy change or firewall policy change kind of dry run. So basically, you're like, if I make this change, like, what does this break and or open up within my network kind of thing? I feel like when you progress to a certain point is an enterprise company with firewalling, and especially if you're adding in that layer of complexity of egress filtering, you have to be at least considering implementing some kind of policy change. I think what it should do, to your point about the sales guy saying you do everything in sliced bread, what it should do is help you make rule changes faster, right? Mm-hmm. I've spoken with organizations who are like, well, yeah, if we need to make a rule change, like it takes a day to evaluate all the potential impacts and test and see what's going to happen. If the software can just promise that, but if it can actually cut your time down to make those changes, that means it's a lot more like what we were talking about before, is that DevOps cycle of we're constantly updating.
And I'm going to circle that back around, though, to one critical thing. Anytime you start talking about the ability of something to assess, there's a problem. And that comes down to you, faithful viewer. The problem is that in real-world networks, someone has to sit down and actually have got all that in place.
Yes.
Because if your network is not well-defined and well-documented and all your security strategies well-documented and all these layers are piled on and you really understand it, you slap something like this in there, you're not going to get much in return.
No,
because
that's a great point.
You can punch it in and go, I'm going to make this change. How does it impact the organization? And it goes, there will be no impact, sir, because the rest of it's completely undefined, and I've seen that so many times. Mm-hmm. And then you get back to this evaluation of how much will it cost us to fully document all these kind of problems and how these things are going to work. And that worries me a little when I talk to you and try to consult with somebody and they say we want to buy this product, it'll solve all our problems and all our worldly needs will go away. But the reality of it is, and you guys know that better than I do even, that your network may not be fully spec'd. It may not be just this nice, clear thing, and you say punch in A and out comes C and everything works the way we think it is. Some of it's a little black magic-y from a lot of networks I've had. And then, if you can't just ask 4 or 5 people or however many people it takes, depending on your size, tell me exactly how these things work together. And people, go, yes, sir, spec 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done. Then it's going to get a little dicey as to how effective something like that would really be.
Well, Doug, thank you very much for sitting in on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.